Millions of Americans are working from home because of the pandemic, but the toxic work environment that used to be confined to the four walls of your office, in lots of cases, has now also seeped into the four corners of your Zoom. So hiring and employment expert Jackie Ducci is here to talk all about how to recognize if you indeed are in a toxic work environment from your house. Hi, Jackie.
Hi, Lisa. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, of course. Wait, I didn't even realize that you could have how could your house be a toxic work environment? How could that be?
I think that's been quite a surprise for a lot of people, for sure. But here we are.
Yeah, here we are. Okay, so let's talk about, obviously, we've known for years that work environments, in some cases, are toxic. You know, there's managers that are, overbearing, perhaps bullying. There are coworkers who, are gossipy. There's all these different things. But how do you recognize if it's happening when you're working remotely?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's just a gut check for a lot of people. Like, you have to just tune into how you're feeling. Like, how is the morale amongst yourself and your coworkers? Do people feel happy and proud to say that they work for this company, or not so much? Is the vibe negative or not? These are just things that when we get real with ourselves, we just sort of know. And if something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the things that you might recognize. I would think maybe like if you're on a Zoom conference and you find yourself saying negative things on a text to a coworker, right, about the person who's talking on Zoom. You're having these third-party conversations that are really mean-spirited. Is that what we're talking about?
In the worst case scenario, it can be. I hear that sometimes. I can't believe that that's actually happening. It kind of feels like high school, right? But again, here we are. I think everyone just has this pandemic fatigue at this point. We're all fried. We've been at this for way too long. People's kids are driving them crazy, so many things. So I think we just have a tendency to be really short with people. Mm-hmm. One thing I'll say about that, though, is that you have to be careful because it can be easy to misinterpret somebody's tone. Like when you're communicating in text or email, so much of communication gets lost because, as we all know, like most of communication is not written. It's, body language and all these other things. So you have to be careful. Just don't jump to the worst case scenario every time someone's a little blunt with you.
Right. That's a really good point. So maybe it's not a toxic work environment you're dealing with. Maybe it's a simple miscommunication because you're not face to face with someone in an office.
Right.
If you got an email that was questionable, in an office, it would have been easy for you to kind of walk to the office next door or the cubicle next door and be like, hey, Sally, did you really mean this? What exactly did you mean? And when you are far apart, that just can't be a thing.
Exactly. And one thing that I encourage people to do is just warm up communication as much as possible. So, if you get a text and you're not really sure how to interpret it, just pick up the phone, talk to somebody. In my company, we do a lot of voice memos. If anybody has an iPhone, you can do that. You can record your voice and send it through text, but they actually listen to it. So it's kind of like a voice mail, sort of. It's just so much easier to convey tone and just treat each other like human beings as opposed to through a screen.
Right. No, there's a lot, as a television person, I totally understand that there can be a lot of things that get misconstrued if you're not seeing visually or hearing, what's going on. Okay. So that's how you can kind of recognize this may be a toxic work environment. I would imagine as well, like if you feel like you're being bullied, or if you feel like you're not getting heard by the boss. That's another thing that people should be paying attention to just in general, right?
For sure. Yeah. That can happen anywhere. And I really believe it's like toxic cultures were probably toxic before the pandemic. You know what I mean? I don't think these amazing companies suddenly became this way overnight or vice versa. So, if you're feeling that way, you're probably feeling it a little bit before as well. This is just making it worse.
Right. Okay. So lastly, I want to talk about what can you do if, yes, indeed, you've done the gut check and you're like, this is a bad scenario. So what should I do?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm never a proponent of anyone staying in a bad situation. My advice is to get out as quickly as you can. Of course, that's easier said than done, and it's going to take time. So in the meantime, to bridge the gap between when you decide you're leaving and when you actually find a job, I really believe that mindset is so important, because in life, what we focus on is what amplifies in our experience. So if you're in a bad situation and you're constantly going over in your brain about every awful thing that happened that day, it's going to make a bad situation feel exponentially worse. Whereas if you can just latch on to anything positive, a coworker that's a great friend and has your back, or a project you're working on that you love, just anything you can really hone in on, it's going to make the bad situation at least feel more tolerable until you can do something about it. So that's number one.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and obviously, I wouldn't suggest, I don't know, I'm not the hiring expert, you are, but like if you're in this toxic situation, probably the knee-jerk reaction to just haul off and quit in the middle of a pandemic also might not be the best idea.
Yeah, it may be. I mean, everybody's different. Like, some people need that fire under them of like, oh my God, like I have nothing now. I need to figure this out. Some people are more cautious. So I think you just have to know yourself. And it also depends what industry you're in, because certain industries it's probably easier to land right now than others. So yeah.
Well, just check in with yourself. Make sure that you are not living in a toxic work environment. Sometimes talk it out, I would imagine, too, with your coworkers. And your boss might help too. Jackie, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.